Now, one of the things I like to do on the HPWA, indeed all of HPANWO, is to discuss some interesting philosophical contradictions, such as: what is the sound of one hospital porter clapping? Okay, that's an easy one. I'll try another. If a hospital porter falls down in the middle of the woods and there's no one else there to hear him, does he make any sound? Unless he goes, I'm a hospital porter falling over, crash, something like that. Maybe they're not so contradictory and difficult to solve after all. Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order, welcome to HPANWO TV. It's that time of year again. Yes, it's St Theo's Day. Well, actually, it's not St Theo's Day. It's today's actually unfortunately, it's actually the 18th of June today, so I'm a little bit late with my St Theo's stuff. And the reason for that is basically I didn't have time. As you know, I'll put links in the description box to the previous videos I've done on this, and you can follow them. But basically, this is a celebration of the patron saint of hospital porters. Yes, we do. We have a patron saint. His name is St Theobald of Ruggiero, and his feast day is June the 1st. Now, St Theobald of Ruggiero was actually a monk, and he was born in the year 1170, a long time ago, in Piedmont in Italy, and he became very, very famous for carrying sick people into town from rural parts of the Italian countryside where they couldn't get to hospitals and things like that. So he would actually carry people into town just so they could see a doctor, and that's probably how he became known as the patron saint of hospital porters. And as I said, June 1st is St Theo's Day, St Theobald of Ruggiero's Day, to give him its full title. And every year, for about the last 15 years or so, I have been celebrating St Theo's Day as a former hospital porter, which I am. Have I mentioned that before? Yes, I have. And so, this year St Theo's Day is no exception. But I couldn't actually celebrate St Theo's Day on St Theo's Day because, well, as you know if you've watched the video, I was in Devon. But I did mention it, I think. I did mention it in one of the scenes on my Devon video when I was actually there on June the 1st. I think I did say something like, Happy St Theo's Day, etc, etc. Now, as always on St Theo's Day, I'm arranging a St Theo's Day party. And this year the St Theo's Day party is on, well, it's very late, like I said. It's a Tuesday. It's Tuesday the 26th of June. And you're welcome to come along if you want. It's at the Britannia Inn in Oxford, and I've got some flyers here. I'll just show you these flyers. Getting to a shady spot here, and these are the St Theo's Day flyers. There we are, St Theo 2018. Here's the hospital porter symbol, which I designed. Nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent, Eleanor Roosevelt, and I thought that's a good kind of St Theo's message, basically. A place to Britannia Inn, London Road, Headington, Tuesday, June the 26th, 7 PM till late. And apologies for the delay because it's late, that's it. And it gives a few details there of St Theobald of Ruggiero, and in association with HPANWO and the HPWA. So it's basically the same, pretty much the same as last year's flyer, it's just adapted it slightly. The design is good actually, so I don't see any need to change it. But what I've done, I've just been into the John Radcliffe. Where you just saw me there was actually at the gates of the Osler Road end. This is Osler Road here, of the John Radcliffe Hospital, my old hospital, where I served my entire hospital porter in Korea. And I went in there, and I did bump into somebody I knew, one of my old brother porters. And well, I don't want to say any more because I don't want to get him into trouble. But I did sort of interact with him a bit socially. But like I said, you know, they'll kick you out for almost anything nowadays, apart from things you really deserve to be kicked out for. But now I'm heading for the now for the Manor Hospital, because that's over there. In fact, I can't get through that way, but I know I'll probably find another way through. But I'm going to the Manor Hospital, that hospital there, which is part of the Nuffield Group. It's a private hospital. But I'm going there because I've got to deliver these flyers to the other hospitals, like I did last year. Because this is not just an event for John Radcliffe Hospital porters, it's an event for all hospital porters, and indeed anyone else who wants to come along. Don't care if you're just a civilian, a mere civilian, you're still welcome to come to St Theo's Day celebrations if you wish. And I don't know if I can get in here. I think it's just the way into the car park, but that lady's just walked in. Someone's just walked in that way. So, yeah, I think I'll actually go in there, so I'm going to stop filming now, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, mission accomplished. I've dropped off a flyer at the Manor Hospital. I did find my way around through the reception. It's still the same as it was last year. If you watched the video I did then, or maybe the year before, when I filmed the dropping off the flyers. Very, very sort of like prim and well-dressed receptionist with makeup and that. The private hospitals go in, they really go for like image, very, very big, and they always have done. The NHS is trying to catch up with that, but it's succeeding only partly. Now, the thing about the NHS is, like, I've often people often think about this as some kind of contradiction, because, and it is in a way, because I've listened to, as you know, I often quote Stefan Molyneux and what he says about socialised medicine, or as he called it, socialised medicine. All right, and he goes on about Obamacare, and stuff like that. Okay, but the thing is, the National Health Service is socialised medicine, but it worked, you see. I mean, obviously there's a lot of issues associated with that and many, many other things to do with it, but I'm going to turn this round so you can hear me. But the NHS worked. And of course, maybe, I don't know what Molyneux thinks about like the privatisation of the NHS, because since the NHS has been privatised, and let's face it, it's been privatised. I'll say more about that later on, but it has been privatised. It exists. It's still called the National Health Service, but that really is just a corporate brand name now. I think it always will be called that, but it is just a corporate brand name. It's not working better than it used to be when it was completely public. This doesn't mean that Molyneux's and therefore myself and a lot of other people are wrong about socialism, are wrong about state healthcare and stuff, and wrong about these things, or wrong in principle about socialism. But it does mean that the evidence suggests that a public health service can be made to run properly. Now, the thing about the privatisation of the NHS is it's, I think this may not be what Molyneux calls capitalism, but more like what he calls crapitalism, which is like crony corporatism or gangster capitalism, as Terence McKenna called it. I suppose the thing about it is, it's not the free market, you see. I mean, Molyneux goes on about the free market. Maybe if there was a privatised healthcare system based on the free market, then it would work much better. Using the non-aggression principle and the initiation of the use of force and universally preferable behaviour. I'm talking like him again now. Yeah, but this is his terminology. But maybe that would work better. I don't know. But then again, the kind of private healthcare we have now. I mean, I'm not talking about the Nuffield Group, which is what the Manor Hospital is associated with. And the Manor Hospital is a nice hospital. I understand why people go private in this country. Well, you can't avoid going private, but you go for the state healthcare system. You can have the state private system or the private system. But as I said, when they contracted out the porters, I'll say more about this later on when I start talking about Mediclean and things like that. When they started contracting out little bits of the NHS, it was awful. The service plummeted. But then, of course, people in Unison who tend to be left-wing, they will say, well, that's simply capitalism for you. But the answer could be, it's simply private. It's simply the wrong kind of privatisation. It's greed plus state intervention. Because I mean, it wasn't real privatisation in the sense that companies like Mediclean and Carillion, which has now collapsed, I'll say more about that later, did not have to compete in the free market. They were essentially de facto monopolies who didn't have to compete with anyone because they existed. They were given their position through state regulation. They were awarded it by a tendering process, and of course they simply chose the lowest bid they could get, because they don't have to provide. The NHS doesn't have to provide a good service. It can provide any service it likes because it is essentially a dictatorship. So they'll just go for the lowest. They'll go for the lowest bid they can get, and then let them screw up the service, and they did. Medically completely screwed up the entire hospital portering service, and I watched it happen, and it was very, very painful. I watched it happen over 10 long years, and it was painful to see that happen. So maybe, you know, things are not as simple as I thought they were. And I mean, I started out when I was a new porter. When I started out as a porter, I was very left-wing. I was a trades unionist, and I mean, I saw through it very quickly. I mean, literally, I saw through. I think I was only hardcore for about a year. I mean, it didn't take me long, luckily, to see through it. I mean, there's still some people still in it now. Can you believe it? Okay, I'm moving on to the next hospital now, and I've only got 3 of these left, which is, I should have 5, and I've only got 4, and I had to give one to the man. That means I've only got 3 left, which is, so I'll turn this around, which is not enough, because normally I put 1 in the Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre, 1 in the ambulance station, and 1 at Churchill Reception, the porters at Churchill Reception, and I won't have enough now for all those things. I'll have to choose between the ambulance station and Churchill Reception. I think I'll have to be Churchill Reception, because that's at least where the porters are. So it's going to have to be Nuffield, and just the Nuffield reporters. Hang on, I've got 3. Right, yeah, 1 for Nuffield. No, that's right. 1 for the Manor Hospital. 1 for Nuffield Reception. 1 for the ambulance station, and 1 for Churchill Reception. So what am I talking about? Can't even count properly. Okay, so I've got enough flyers. That's enough. Okay, so I'll. What I do at the ambulance station, I usually shove one under the door, something like that. I don't think the man's name are interested, but it's always worth a try. I wonder who I've seen it. Now, there's one guy. There's one guy I knew who went to the Nuffield. He sort of went to the Nuffield just before I got kicked out. I don't know if he'll be there. I might see him. Now he's one of. Now this particular porter is a group I call the untouchables, and that doesn't mean he walks around with a Tommy gun robbing banks. It means there's certain individuals, right, who can get away, seem to be able to get away with almost anything, and I call them the untouchables. And I used to think, I mean, there's obviously the racism issue, which means that, you know, if you're a non-white porter, which is the majority of porters nowadays, you know, management is always reluctant to tackle you in case you play the R card, you know, racism. But so in a sense that's a form of untouchability. But a lot of the untouchables are not. Many untouchables are actually white. Now the deputy senior porter in theatre, so he's going to come up later actually. He used to be the deputy senior porter in theatre from those days, not anymore. But he is an untouchable. This was a guy who was an absolute slob. He used to turn up late. He used to be off sick once a week or so. You know, he'd piss off early, skive, everything. And not only did they nothing was ever done about it, they ended up promoting him. And that's another thing. I mean, if you're crap at your job in any sensible institution, they just kick you out. I said this last year, didn't I? When I was talking about Sister Sarah Kite, the nurse. Do you remember the nurse who was sacked for praying? I talked about her on last year's St Theo's video. But they sack you for praying. It's like, oh God, it's unbelievable. But anyway, this guy, yeah, that's right. I mean, he was never ever disciplined. I mean, he was still there until a couple of years ago, actually. And this bloke who moved to the Nuffield Orthopaedic, he's the same. He's one of these untouchables. And I don't know what the magic spell is which they cast, which means that they can't ever be disciplined, and they just get away with everything. I mean, this guy is actually an alcoholic, and he has been out on duty drunk. I know for a fact he's been on duty drunk, and nothing. He just once the boss was there and everything. You know, the actual head porter was in front of him. So just send him home sick. Jesus, if that had been me, I'd have been out on my ear. In fact, that's the only thing they do sack you for nowadays. Praying with patients, if you're a nurse, or writing articles called Hospital Porters Against the New World Order and things like that. That's what they sack you for nowadays. They don't sack you for being a lazy bastard. They don't sack you for being incompetent. They don't sack you for being stupid and irresponsible. No, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. I mean, you'll go a long way if you are one of those things. If you're a lazy, incompetent shitbag, then you have a long, glorious career in the NHS ahead of you. In fact, they'll promote you. In fact, all the people who are made up to management from the staff before they started bringing in outside management, all of them, every single one of them, which is absolutely, well, we were glad to see the back of them because they were so awful in their actual job. So I take it as a compliment. I was never offered promotion. I was never offered promotion once in 23 years. I acted up. I was acting senior porter a couple of times, but never permanently was I promoted. I was a basic grade porter from the day I started till the day I left, 23 years later. And I take that as an enormous compliment. I really do. And I can't help feeling bitter about it. I know I'm sounding angry, and I am angry. Because I don't like to see something I love being destroyed. And it was destroyed. And the apathy some people some of the porters were showing about it. I mean, there was this guy, I remember when Medically first came along, right? Everyone was just thinking, well, some of the people were genuinely against it. I mean, I was genuinely against it. I was actually criticised by some of the other porters because they felt I wasn't passionate enough. I wasn't passionately anti-medically enough because I was saying I want to make the best of it. I want to continue to do a good job. And I got criticised. Well, you're not anti-medically enough. You know, those people who said that, the moment they were kissing arse, and they were in the office before you knew it, behind a desk with a clipboard and a suit. Whereas me, I stuck by my guns. I stuck by my principles. I refused to cave in. And what really pisses me off, it's not malice, it's just stupidity. And it's cowardice. It's not malice, but there was this guy there, one of the senior porters, I remember there was like all the senior porters were like desperate to get into the office. There was one guy he was a basic grade, right, like me, and he was desperate for promotion. And he was passed over. He applied 14 times for senior porter's position during the NHS in the pre-medically NHS days, and he was passed over every single time because they knew he was absolutely impossible. He was an absolute liability. Medically, come along. And immediately he's promoted to, well, they had an intermediate grade called working senior. Less than a month later, he didn't even do a full shift rotation. He was senior porter over in the main hospital. He was working senior at maternity, and then he was full senior in the main hospital. Literally, it's a couple of months later. He's in the office within 6 months. This same porter, this same liability, who the NHS management had the sense to know not to allow in positions of responsibility, is basically running the place. He actually made head porter within a year. Oh, anyway, I'm at the Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre now. Time to drop off another of these. Okay, so I just dropped a flyer off at the Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre. Now I'm going to go to the hospital, the Churchill Hospital next. I've actually decided not to go to the ambulance station this year. I mean, I know I have enough flyers, but I think what I'll do is instead I'll drop two at the I'll drop two at reception. I'll drop two at the, pardon? No, I'm not filming you. Bloody idiots. At I'm going to drop two at the, at reception. What a fucking twat, sorry. He broke my train of thought. Stop filming. I was pointing the camera at myself. So I'm going to drop two at the main Churchill reception. I'm not going to bother with the ambulance station. I'll go past the ambulance station in a minute. I'm not going to go in there. Now yeah, I mean, I went into reception. There were two people sitting there dressed in smart uniforms. I didn't know if they were porters or not. Didn't say porter anywhere on it. I didn't salute them. It's a man and a woman, Asian, they could just be civilian receptionists, as they have a lot of those in most hospitals now. But now what happened next is the I noticed the logo on there. The logo on there, I think, was called actually G4S. Now G4S, originally Group 4, I'm going to cross over this road now. Originally Group 4 is a notorious company. Now, it doesn't surprise me that the Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre, couldn't wait to award a contract to a company with the worst reputation in the entire bloody world. G4S, now G4S, they came to infamy, I was going to say fame. They came to infamy in the 80s because they were like running, they used to run the prison vans, you know, the Black Mariahs, for transporting prisoners from court to jails and things like that. And they became infamous because what they would do is they would actually let the prisoners escape. They became a national joke because they actually used to let the prisoners escape. And so, see that mast there? That's the ambulance station. And so the government decided to punish them by actually letting them run prisons. And then of course G4S got loads of other contracts and things like that, and got loads of other contracts. And so of course they next fell into disfavour because they were given the contract to run the security of the London Olympics. Do you remember? I actually covered this at the time. I actually did a couple of videos about this back then, in 2012. Because they did this, there's a guy called Ben Fellows actually spoke out, and I mentioned him before. He was actually working for them, and he actually spoke out. And he went to the media and he says, look, it's an absolute sham. It's an absolute mayhem. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. And the government investigated and they fined them and stuff like that. But of course, it gave them the excuse to militarise the Olympics even further. And to make sure they had troops everywhere, so that the whole place was under martial law, basically. So in a sense, G4S did their duty. They did their duty by militarising the Olympics even further. And so, so that's what happened. So of course, what they do, I mean, it's unbelievable. Because again, this is where I think Molyneux's right. If this really was a free market, if this really was a situation of the free market, they would lose everything. They would go bankrupt, and they would deserve to go bankrupt. The only reason they don't, the only reason they can be so useless and successful, is because they're basically government contractors. And I think this, I suppose, it took me many years to actually realise this, because I never used to really quite understand that point. But that is actually what was actually going on. So. Well, they'll go from strength to strength. I mean, they're being awarded contracts like sweeties. I mean, the government hands out they hand out these contracts like toffee apples to these numpties. And who suffers? The staff suffer at the hospital. The patients suffer. That's who suffers. Oh, it's so well. I'm gonna get onto the Churchill now. I'll deliver 2 more of these, and then that's it. Okay, I've just left the Churchill Hospital now, and I basically come out through the side of the car park where there's this little pathway, this little Ho Chi Minh Trail, which is actually a shortcut home. I'm actually not far from Lye Valley, which is where I was the other day with Nick, doing that little video about the creature, the beast that goes rrrr, spooky footprints. I could actually walk down there, probably a little bit quicker walking down there to get home. But, well, I think I'll save that actually for the day when I actually do go there with Nick. I'm not scared, you understand. I fear nothing. I'm an ex-hospital porter, but I just fancy a longer walk, put it that way. Anyway, I went into the Churchill and I dropped off 2 at the reception. This nice Asian senior porter was there. I saluted him. I didn't recognise him, but there was a chap behind, I think, sitting in the lodge. They do have a lodge there, which is nice, because they've actually started doing away with porters' lodges. One of the many, there's almost anything that's traditional and good and people like it, they just do away with. But there's a guy sitting in the lodge who I did recognise, and I waved to him. And he did remember me, and he just said, "Hello, Ben." Now he's one of these people. He's he's a serial reliever, and he's still... Now, serial relievers really can... well, I should explain what a serial reliever is. A serial reliever is a name. It's actually a term I invented, but it's sort of caught on. Is a porter who basically spends nearly all his working life, his adult life, in the hospital portering service. He basically is a porter till he dies. But every 4 or 5 years or so, he leaves and he goes off to do another job. And he's in that job for 6 months to a year, or maybe less, and then he's back in portering. And it's a cycle he repeats again and again and again throughout his professional portering life. And I don't understand why. I don't understand what makes a serial reliever tick. Why do they do it? This guy's a serial reliever. There's several reasons why it just doesn't make sense. Firstly, you break your service every few years. You're never going to accrue any of the long service bonuses. Come to think of it, that doesn't really count anymore, does it? Because there are no long service bonuses anymore. But in the days when there were long service bonuses, you used to get like increments on your pay every few years and things like that. You used to get like extra pension things and stuff like that. You don't get that anymore. You just have the standard pay spine, first increment, that's it. You come back, it's just as a new starter. So I don't know why. So the wind's up again. I don't know why serial relievers do it for that reason. You know, I don't know why that's one reason why you wouldn't want to be a serial reliever. And also another thing is, there's always the risk that you might not manage to get back into portering. I mentioned this guy who he was actually an untouchable and he left, and he couldn't get back in. Which is because obviously someone had the sense not to take him back in. So serial relievers always face that risk. Every time they go through one of their the leaving part of their cycles, this sine wave of enthusiasm about hospital portering, they run the risk of not having the decision taken out of them and the cycle being broken with them outside hospital portering, which means they can no longer get back in. So I do not know what motivates a serial reliever. I don't know why they do it. I mean, either for me, if you love hospital portering and you want to stay in hospital portering, then what's the point of leaving? What's the point of leaving? And we used to joke, oh, we'll be back in 6 months. And he was. And there's some guys, they went through this process 3 times during the time I was there. And I was like, why? And I asked him once, why'd you keep doing it? He says, oh, I thought I was getting something better. And I just go, well, you know, you're going to be back. Why'd you know that you'll be back? You know that you've done this before. You must be able to have the introspective abilities to look at your own behaviour and realise that you're actually you don't actually want to leave hospital portering. So it's almost like he doesn't actually understand what's really driving him. And that's what a serial reliever is. And this chap in the lodge is a serial reliever. And I don't know, he's obviously at the Churchill now. I mean, last time I saw him actually was at the JR, when he was at the JR. He'd just come back from like 6 weeks at the BMW plant, which he got back in a portering. Oh, it's crazy. I mean, there was this. Some people do it once and they learn their lesson. There was this theatre porter, Filipino chap, nice guy. I still know him on Facebook, and he's a bit of a shit stirrer, but he's still a nice guy. And it's wind's up, so I'm holding the mic close to me. It's the old golf club there. Nice chap, and he left. He left because he got a job at £18 an hour, basically working for a contractor at the BMW plant in Cowley, the famous car factory. And he was doing night shifts. I mean, he was doing 12-hour night shifts. And he phoned me. I was on nights. I was due to start on nights, and I had a new shift partner and everything. I hadn't had a new permanent shift partner, but a relief porter was covering for him. So I was my first night with him, and I had a phone call at 3 a.m. Ben, he said, and this guy was crying. He was in tears. Ben, I want to come back. I can't do the Filipino accent. Ben, please, I want to come back, please. I said, okay, well, look, I won't use his name. So don't worry, just call senior porter in the morning. I gave his name. Call the senior porter in the morning, tell him you want to come back. Tell him you want back in. Your job, they'll probably be able to cancel your resignation. Don't worry. You've only been gone a couple of days. And luckily for him, he did come back in. He managed to get back in. They didn't have to do that. They could have said, no, you left. They decided just to tear up his resignation and bring him back in. But he, I think, learned his lesson. And he's not left since, and he's still there now. And that was like about 12 years ago. So hopefully he's learned his lesson. He's not a serial reliever. He did it once, and I think he's realised it was a mistake. So, interesting. So that basically, I've dropped off the flyers. We'll see who turns up. But anyway, I'm going to go through some of the news that's been happening over the course of the last year since the last St Theo's Day. Because a lot has happened, and I remember in the last film I did promise you that I would tell you the ODO story. Okay, so I'm now going to tell you the ODO story. Okay, I could do it now, but I mean, it's difficult to concentrate when I'm out and about with this camera, and there's people telling me not to film them, even though the bloody lens is pointing towards me, and the wind's blowing, and there's serial relievers and untouchables all over the place. So I'm gonna do this in a studio environment, at home. Okay. So thanks for watching, and this is the moment you've been waiting for. You get to hear the ODO story. Okay, I've decided to do the sort of informational parts of my St Theo's Day film at home in studio format. It's just a bit easier than sitting in the cemetery at Northway or walking along the streets and having all these distractions. Besides, I've got an awful lot for this year, more than last year, and what I've got to talk about actually is something quite difficult for me to discuss. It's a lot of painful memories. Now, I did promise you last year that I would tell you this story, and it's a story that's been waiting a long time to be told. I haven't told it ever. So this is a HPANWO TV exclusive and a St Theo's exclusive. Although everybody who knows me at the hospital knows this story. But this refers to my career transition from... Well, I talked about my career transition from the delivery suite to the operating theatres last year, I remember. I did actually say that I was actually moving from one to the other. But what happened was, my career in theatres was quite minimal. It was, well, not minimal. It lasted about from 1999 until 2005. So that's 7 years. Yeah, 7 years. Now, the story of how I left the theatres and got into returned to general service, because I went back to general service, it's very long, it's very intricate, and it was very, very educational. Very educational indeed. It had an enormous effect on me, and it was very upsetting, very, very painful actually. But you know, as many of these things are, in reflection, they're quite character building. Now, to explain how this happened, it's necessary to know a bit about the organisational structure of the John Radcliffe Hospital's portering department at that time. It's changed since then. Now, unusually for an NHS hospital, we had a single large department, a portering department, which consisted of a general pool. Consisted of this general pool, it's known as the lodge, and specialised sections from the portering department were deployed to various other departments, such as X-ray, theatres, emergency department, A&E, etc. Now, so this is how this. And usually, normally it's different. It's a bit different in other hospitals. Normally, in other hospitals, each department very often will employ its porters, and there's no single porters department apart from the general service section. Now, a porter can be made to serve anywhere within the remit of the portering job description. That's part of your deal. Okay, which is why they often move people around. It's nasty when that happens. Sometimes you don't want that to happen. But in most hospitals, as I said, departments tend to employ their own porters. Now, a couple of them did that at the John Radcliffe. More of them do it now. But the general pool is completely independent in those hospitals. Now this changed completely, and in a sense the John Radcliffe went into a more traditional role in 2005, which is when the Oxford Radcliffe Hospitals NHS Trust entered into a contract with Carillion plc to build the new £600 million West Wing. And so that's a deal designed to sabotage the NHS, but that's a long story. And the contract involved the amalgamation of the portering services with the domestics and the catering to create a brand new department called Facilities. And at the same time, the refuse section of the old portering department, that's the refuse section is basically the hospital's dustmen, if they're known as environmental porters in this politically correct world, they were split off and made into a new sub-department called the waste team, or environmental porters, as I said. Now at the time I'd been serving in theatres. I've been there since 1999, so 7 years I've been in theatres as part of the portering department, and we were under a senior porter and with a deputy senior, and then all the rest of us, and we're all part of the portering department. My job involved transporting patients to and from surgery, the movement of patients within the theatres, and basically all the other basic logistics relating to equipment, drugs, specimens, rubbish, anything else. Now what happened was the theatres department administration proposed to employ their own porters independently once this changeover happened with Carillion. Now the proposal was approved. This happened on the surface. It looked good because basically the porters. What happened was a few years earlier, the private contract, the shitty private contract in Mediclean had been kicked out on its arse. And we were going to stay retention of employment. We would stay NHS. Now the theatres administration had proposed this. Okay, they wanted to employ their own porters independently, and their proposal was approved. They were granted a budget, and recruitment was simplicity itself. And basically, it came under the transfer of undertakings and protection of employment laws. So the old departmental staff, who had been deployed in theatres at the time of transition, were simply acquired automatically under those rights. It was not obligatory. We had the option of being returned to department, which I didn't take, which was my big mistake. So under the TUPE regulations, we were automatically transferred. I agreed. I signed a new contract, and as I said, this was a mistake. To be honest, I was misled over this issue by some of the others, by the management. But had I declined to do this, I would simply have been redeployed within the rest of the new hospital portering facility services. So on the surface it seems like a good deal, because becoming a theatre porter employed directly by theatres meant a pay rise, an extra £1,200 per year, and we'd be answerable only to the theatre management, no longer have to deal with the remote controllers in the facilities office. But there was a catch. We would no longer be called porters. Our new job title was ODO, Operating Department Orderly. I had no idea how much this would affect me till the first time I heard a voice on the intercom saying, "Are there any ODOs there, please?" Up until then, when the intercom went, it was, "Are there any porters there, please?" And I remember it perfectly to this day. And I sat there, my jaw dropped. I felt like Winston Smith in 1984, when he first heard someone announce that Oceania is at war with East Asia, Eurasia are our allies. Or with East Asia and Eurasia are our allies. So I asked the head theatre porter. He was originally the section senior. He was now called the theatre head porter. I said, could I carry on calling myself the theatre porter? And he said, no, absolutely not. Now on a nuts and bolts level, he was right. I had signed the contract, something I now bitterly regretted. However, I got a sticky label. This is what I did. I couldn't bear it. I got a sticky label and wrote the word porter on it and stuck it over my name badge where it said Ben Emlyn Jones ODO. I stuck it over the ODO bit. And a few days later, I was called into the office of the theatre manager. And sitting beside me was the head. This is the head of human resources. That's another Orwellian word. It's like these Orwellian politically correct euphemisms are everywhere, aren't they? I assumed this was just an informal discussion. At no point was I cautioned and asked if I wanted a trade union representative. The theatre manager, explained to me
that what I was doing was defacing hospital property and breaching security policy. She asked me to remove the sticker and I refused. Then the HR manager asked me why I didn't like being called an ODO, and I said I intensely dislike this new job title. It's a shallow, gimmicky, artificial, politically correct piece of Orwellian newspeak. It's nothing more than a stupid piece of corporate jargon. It's not a word at all. It's just a piddling little soulless plastic euphemism. I think it sounds mindless and highly unprofessional. ODO is also sometimes pronounced Odo. It's literally the letters ODO, and that sounds rather like odor, or perhaps more aptly, order, as in the New World one. Now, porter is actually a very ancient and noble word. It goes back to the Latin portare, which means to carry. And I really became emotional as I spoke in this meeting. I really did. I said, truthfully, I've shed sweat, blood and tears for over 17 years for that little word, porter. And I told him I will never give it up. The theatre porters at the... And he said, but the theatre porters at the RI, it's a Radcliffe Infirmary, they're called ODOs, and they've always been called ODOs, and none of them seem to mind. Really? Now, the RI is Oxford's oldest hospital. It was opened over 280 years ago. Were the theatre porters honestly called ODOs from day one? Well, I doubt that. And anyway, they asked me to remove this. They asked me to remove the sticker, and I refused again. And so they allowed me to return to work. But a couple of days later, I received a letter at my home address warning me that the next time I turned up for duty, if I did not have an intact name badge and I was willing to answer to the job title of ODO, then I would be suspended and face full disciplinary action. Now, I called my shop steward, a man called Eamon, and he was furious that I'd even received the letter and considered it highly wrongful for them to have sent it to me. He chastised me that I shouldn't have cooperated with the panel. There's no such thing as an informal discussion in this place, he said. You should have walked out and only agreed to come back with me at your side. Yeah, I learnt that, didn't I? He told me I had no choice but to remove the sticker, for now. However, he immediately made an appointment for us to get together and construct an official grievance. And he did this against the advice of most of the other conveners at the union, and for this I'm eternally grateful to him. Eamon, he's the best ever, I'll tell you. The local Unison branch were quite alarmed by the stand I'd made, and some of them questioned my mental health, because for them it's a total non-issue. They said, look, who cares what you're called? This is what one of them said to me. You've just bagged yourself an extra $1,200 a year. What the hell's wrong with you? It's very hard to explain to somebody who is apathetic towards their occupation and just sees it as a 40 hours a week out of their lives. It's just 40 hours a week out of my life, just in order to generate an income. But the saddest part of the whole situation was the response from my fellow porters. The first day of work after the news broke, I walked into the lodge, and my extremely proud and dignified brother porters were withdrawn and subdued in the way they greeted me. All the usual warmth and camaraderie was absent, and there was this embarrassed silence. And it continued all day. With the exception of Eamon, the shop steward, not one of those men stood by me. That's 18 porters, the entire section, rejected me. On the contrary, they shunned me. I mean, I heard it got worse, and I heard behind the back, I heard one of them calling me a fucking idiot and other epithets. And the deputy senior was the worst. One of his jobs was to keep a record of annual leave, and he did this by writing the porters' names in a big diary. And at one point, he booked 2 bank holiday loo days. I booked 2 bank holiday loo days with him over the phone. And on the first day I went on leave, he phoned me up and asked why I wasn't at work. And I told him he'd booked the loo days with him. I'd booked the loo days with him a week earlier. And he replied, Lou. It's L-I-E-U, by the way. I booked the loo days with him. And he said, no, you didn't. He deliberately had not written my name down in the book. And what could I do? I'd made the booking over the phone, and this was something we all did and considered it perfectly valid because we trusted each other. This deputy senior porter had tricked me by pretending to book my leave, so I was marked down as absence. And there was no doubt that my time in the theatres was limited, and it really was. And it was like, anyway, I replied to the letter sent to me by the manager, I said, and I deliberately, when I wrote back, when I said, put Ben Emily Jones, porter, operating theatres JR2, John Radcliffe Hospital, I deliberately put the word porter in there, rather than ODO. When she wrote to me, she addressed it ODO, but I always replied St Porter. I said, "Hi, hope you had a good Christmas and New Year. Your letter dated 30th of the 12th 05, and the question, have you removed the sticky label for your name badge?" Related to that, your letter dated, and have you removed the sticky label from your name badge? And I replied, "Yes, I have. I think I've made my point, and there's no valour in cutting off my nose to spite my face. Besides, it's only fair that I return my badge to security in the same state that it was issued to me. I will be leaving the theatres department soon. I wish to continue my portering career in another department or another hospital where I am free to express my porterhood. If this is not possible, I will end my portering career in the same way I've always tried to live it, with dignity. If I am given a job in another department, then I'll need to arrange a transfer and give appropriate notice. This I would like to discuss with you, Chris, and my Unison representative at the appropriate time. With the exception of the last 2 months, I will look back at my 7 years in your department very fondly. Porters forever! Ben Emlyn Jones." I put Porters forever in it. Wonder what she thought when she read that. Now, there is no valour in being a false martyr. And as I said in the letter, I had made my point. I even used the word porter in the address. I did it in every letter, even in my letter of resignation. I put the word porter as in my address. Now, I really thought this manager, she might actually be so petty as to send it back to me in order to change, and order me to change it to operating department orderly before accepting it. But luckily, to her credit, she wasn't that bitchy. As good Providence would have it, I was swiftly accepted back into the new facilities department, where I served for the next 7 years until my final discharge, which I've already talked about, in 2012. Now, I actually went to see the manager, the new head porter, and I just said to him, "Look," I said, "I've come to ask if I can join your team." And he said, "All right, you're not happy in theatres." And I said, "Look, I'll be honest with you, I'm in serious trouble. And if you don't take me on, then I'm out of this hospital." And they did. He said, "I had absolutely no hesitation in recruiting you. You've got an excellent record. People really respect you, and it's really great to have you on the team." And I almost burst into tears on the spot. They were actually delighted to have me. And they just said, "Well, as far as the theatres went, this head porter said to me informally, 'Look, it's their loss. They've lost you, and we've gained you.'" That's the closest I've come to breaking down in tears in front of my manager, I'll tell you. So the question is, why did the theatres management go down so zealously on this issue? Not only that, what about the ostracisation? What about the other porters, my immediate peers? This spiteful ostracisation, this trick that was played on me by the deputy senior. Or to put it another way, is the dreaded P word really so awful that it had to be eliminated at such high priority? Such a high priority. Now, a friend of mine, actually, I've just been on the phone to him, actually. He said to me afterwards, "Why did you make such a fuss about a job title, Ben?" And my reply was, "But they made just as much fuss as I did. Have you asked them that question?" Now, no false modesty here. I was really the most valuable member of portering staff in that entire hospital. I was the most dedicated, I was the most expert, I was the most experienced. But they threw me away without any hesitation for the sake of a 3-letter acronym. And what really annoyed and baffled me is that some of the other theatre porters, or ODOs as they're called now, they were really bad at their jobs. And they were left in peace. There's one man in particular springs to mind. Now, this is a guy who was late for work almost every day, and used to sneak off early whenever he could. He was off sick at least 1 day a week, and when he was present, he spent as much time as he could just away skiving. Usually he could be found smoking at the entrance to the service tunnels with the other time wasters, but no one ever caught him out. He was never sacked, he was rarely even reprimanded. He enjoyed 8 cushy years in portering before leaving voluntarily to become a healthcare assistant in some nursing home. This is what I said last year about Sarah's sister Keto, the nurse who was sacked for praying. Just be a lazy scumbag if you want a successful career in the NHS. Don't be good at your job, because you'll just be shit on. You see, they got rid of me, but they were quite content to keep him. And I once asked my friend, who was still a theatre porter in the West Wing, right? This guy I was on the phone to just now. I said, how do the staff feel about being called ODOs? And apparently, you know what they say? They say things like, well, we've always been called ODOs, haven't we? And that's what's really disturbing, right, is that even the porters who were serving before 2005 say this. They've actually forgotten they were ever called porters. Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. Now again, I don't think I really need to explain to this audience, people who watch this video, exactly why this is so important. But I'm going to say why many people not familiar with this subject may wonder why I made a stand over something which they would consider pretty trivial, a technicality. But the words we use for things are vitally important because language is such a precious and central part of the human experience. It is the framework of cognition. You take away the human power of speech and you remove our power of thought, and we then just become no more intelligent than a limpet. This is why human language is under attack. The architects of the New World Order want to degrade and transform it into a degenerate instruction code, as George Orwell warned us. Newspeak was designed to eliminate all meaning from language, leaving only blandness. Now, before he died in 1950, Orwell left us a chilling warning. Allowing for the book, after all, being a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you. I know, George, and I won't. I promise you, I won't. Right, now this is from August of last year. There's been an accident in a hospital. A freak accident in a Spanish maternity hospital. And this has resulted in the grisly death of a young mother, someone called Rocio Cortez Nunez. It's really sad because she just successfully delivered her third child and was being transported between the floors of the Virgin de Valmy hospital in Seville, Spain. Now, the porter had wheeled the stretcher into a lift. Now, this could be a mistranslation because postnatal mothers are usually moved on full-size beds, rather than a stretcher. I was a maternity porter for 9 years. Now, the lift wouldn't move even though the doors opened and closed properly, so the porter began wheeling the vehicle out of the lift. When it was half in and half out, the lift moved with the doors still open, and Miss Nunez was caught in the gap. Now, these are preliminary reports based on witness testimony, and since then I've heard nothing more about it. Now, I'm very, very sad for Mrs. Nunez and for her surviving family, especially her newborn daughter, Triana, who now will never know her mother. I hope the lifts are repaired so this never happens again. But one thing is pretty clear, and this goes against a lot of the assumptions that people make, is that the porter was not to blame in any way. Normally porters get blamed for this sort of thing. You'd be surprised. If in doubt, or even if not in doubt, just blame the porter. It always happens. Oh, this is fantastic. This is brilliant. This happened in November last year. I was walking along the street, and I saw this young woman walking towards me. It was on a city street. I stood aside to let her pass, and she said, "Thank you." And I looked at her carefully, and I realised that I recognised her. It was none other than Miss Stuck-Up Little Bitch Nurse, who I've described before. Now, when in my dignity statement videos and articles, now there are actually about a dozen people to whom I've given that nickname, but this individual has probably done the most to earn it. And as soon as she had passed, I turned round and I started singing the following song at her departing back. Porter's dignity, porter's dignity, porter's dignity, and porter's dignity, porter's dignity, oh porter's dignity, porter's dignity, and porter's dignity, porter's pride, porter's pride, porter's pride, and porter's pride, porter's pride, oh porter's pride, porter's pride, and porter's pride. Now, Miss stuck-up little bitch nurse did not respond and just kept walking, but her gait became more hasty and rigid, exactly like it used to when I used dignity statements against her when I served at the hospital alongside her. And now I said this in the background, you know, in the background. I've done this before, in my previous video, etc., about St Theo. Only ever use dignity statements in situations where your target really deserves them, and I can assure you, she did. And she always did. I've not seen her since my unfair dismissal from the NHS, but I've never forgotten her. And I don't know what happened after that. She may well have called the police about what I did, but you just imagine it, can't you? Or being on the phone, being a policeman, and you get this call. Hello, Thames Valley Police. Yes, you'd like to report a man harassing you on the street. That's a very serious offence. Very well, madam. What form did this harassment take? He sang a song? What kind of song? What? He sang a song about Porter's dignity? What else did he do? Nothing? What? Nothing at all? Then why do you consider that harassment? That day's experience made me realise that I might have been out of hospital porting service for 6 years now, but the dignity statement still has a purpose. And, well, I'll give you another example of that in a minute as well. Right, now, if you're ever in Pewsey, if you're in the West Country, in Wiltshire, there's a beautiful little railway station there, a small, very traditional outpost in the Wiltshire countryside. You may have been through there if you've gone crop circle spotting or UFO hunting. It's just two small platforms, a little stone track, a brick waiting room, and it's a sweet and peaceful place to enjoy the British railway network. And I went there last year after a rather hectic Halloween social event in Devizes. I had half an hour to wait for my train home, so I took a stroll around the area, and I was delighted to come across one of Wiltshire's many well-kept little secrets. Just outside the gates of Platform 2, there's a small black caravan with an awning, and on the side is the words, "The Italian Job." Now inside is a very small but very comfortable cafeteria, and behind the counter was a man called Roy Messenger, and after talking to him for a while I discovered that he is a former hospital porter. And there's me thinking I could tell just by looking. Roy, my extremely proud and dignified brother porter Roy, serves authentic Italian coffee brewed in Turin. It's a special blend of selected beans, and I'm sure my extremely proud and dignified brother porter Roy makes many computers and holiday makers' day with his special flavoured coffee. He also serves pastry and confectionery. I had one of his pain au chocolat, very nice. Now Roy spends most of his days at Pewsey Station, but sometimes he tows his caravan to an outdoor concert, a fair, a festival, because he is available for private hire. If you want to hire an ex-hospital porter in his brilliant little cafeteria, then you go to www.theitalianjobcoffee, all one word, .co.uk. And like my extremely proud and dignified brother porter Roy, I am an ex-hospital porter. I'm trying to find a new life after the hospitals, and it's not easy, and I wish him all the success in the world in Civvy Street. I salute him as an extremely proud and dignified brother porter. If you're ever passing the area by train, please do pay him a visit. Now, I'm sad to report that a hospital porter has died at the Grenfell Tower fire. Now, I've covered the Grenfell Tower on a previous video and on several articles on HPANWO Voice. This is a chap called Abdulaziz Al-Wahabi, and he served at the University College Hospital in London. He was actually the son of a hospital porter, and he entered the profession in his father's footsteps. And his brother-in-law said of him, "You have to have a sense of humour to work in the NHS." He never complained. He got on with the job. Being a porter, you're someone who goes in the operating theatre to x-ray. It's a very important job. You just don't get well paid for it. That's true. He died in his home, Abdulaziz Al-Wahabi, on the 21st floor, along with his wife Fawzia and their 3 children, Yassin, aged 20, Nurhuda, aged 15, and Mehdi, aged 8. I salute the memory of my extremely proud and dignified brother porter. Rest in peace, Abdulaziz. Pride and dignity. Now, believe it or not, in April we got a pay rise, a deal from the government, one of the most generous of the 70-year history of the National Health Service. If NHS servicemen agree to it, which they almost certainly will, it'll see an average basic grade porter's income rise by 15% to above £18,000 per annum, and some staff will receive 29%. and the pay rise will be backdated to this month, that is April, at the time I wrote this, if they agree by the summer. And despite what I've said about this being a pay rise, porters are only some of the beneficiaries. The deal will improve the salaries of the lowest earners in the NHS, most of all porters, cleaners, nursing auxiliaries, junior nurses. But even the higher paid staff, such as nursing sisters, will gain 6.5%. Now, the rise is not going to be an instant handout. It's going to be spread over 3 years. The health unions are very much behind it, but the GMB has voiced a note of pessimism. This pay rise does not make up the massive blow caused by the austerity crash of the late 2000s that saw 5 or more years of frozen pay. It's true, but it's a step in the right direction. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought it sounded too good to be true. And indeed, many other similar situations have emerged in which apparently generous pay rises have been offered, but only in exchange for massive increases in workload and difficult new roles and added to job descriptions. For example, maternity midwifery auxiliaries were originally on band 1 of the agenda for change pay reshuffle. Their duties were simple, making beds and blanket bathing adult patients. But then they were offered band 2 for the same as a basic grade porter, but they had to agree to take on additional duties previously only carried out by qualified midwives on a far higher salary. And this is called being labour intensive, and that is Orwell speak for getting the lowest paid personnel in your organisation to do the most amount of work. But this new pay deal appears not to have any of those strings attached, and believe me, I was on my guard against them. Is this really too good to be true? It's out of my hands, we'll have to wait and see. But I hope so. Now we come on to Richard Branson. Now, when I was a porter, we used to joke about Virgin Health. It was now it was an exaggeration at the time, just a wheeze, but we never imagined the truth would eventually catch up with our jest. Richard Branson indeed has a Virgin Care company. He's got a Virgin Care. He's just earned the biggest haul of privatisation licences ever seen in the NHS. Over 400 separate contracts now belong to Branson's empire. Now it's interesting that when you read about this, you hear about the word dysfunctional used to describe the privatisation procurement process. It says dysfunctional. Why does it not just simply say corrupt? Now, the theory behind NHS privatisation and the reality of its effects are separated by so vast a gulf, by a river of blood, basically. It makes me despair. So few people are talking about it. Now, it was a strategy that was just beginning when I joined the NHS. A year into my service, the porters were contracted out to a company called ISS Mediclean. And this was an outfit that was already running the domestics there. Now, there was a tendering period when several firms put in bids to run the portering service, and the privatisation committee gave it their consideration, quote unquote. Now, during this period, we noticed that the facilities director seemed to be spending a lot of his time in the company of the local Mediclean manager. They took their lunch breaks together and things like that. We knew then what was really going on. When Mediclean won the porter's contract, we were not surprised. We later found out that the facilities manager was given a finder's fee, quote unquote, by somebody behind the screens. A shareholder, we imagine. Now, finder's fee is just a euphemism for bribe, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, it's all legal and above board, which is what is so frightening about this. This is what's so frightening about it. Now, through the decade Mediclean ran the porters, the quality of the service fell through the floor. I watched it happen. I was unable to do anything to stop it. We never completely recovered from that dark age by the time I'd left. Never. Now, no matter how many bad reports the monitoring officer, who was a former senior porter, submitted to the trust management, nothing was ever done. And under Blair's Labour government, privatisation accelerated way past the point of no return. And now the entire NHS is basically nothing more than a network of these tin pot contractors, supported by another network of robotic and amoral bureaucrats. The only competition in the NHS is who's willing to grease the backhanded palm of the correct regulator the quickest and with the crispest unmarked banknotes. So, well, RIP the National Health Service. Right, now I mentioned Carillion PL and C before. Now this is a company that was founded in 1999 at just the right time, and it rode the grand ascending surf of PFI private financial initiatives brought in by Tony Blair's Labour government. as they try to become an extremist caricature of the Conservatives they defeated in the election 2 years earlier. Now, Carillion is primarily a construction and civil engineering contractor, but it also provides management for the facilities it builds. And it is thrown up in many grand edifices all over the world. A motor racing circuit in Thailand, a hotel in Abu Dhabi. And in the 2000s, it was brought in by the UK government to build the newest and most ambitious phase of my old hospital, the John Radcliffe in Oxford. And as part of the deal, it took over management of the entire facilities department, domestics, catering, and of course, portering. Now, none of us were ever directly employed by Carillion. We retained our NHS positions, but we were completely under their control. And I've talked about that before. Now, last year, it was revealed to all that not all was well at the mill. The share price of Carillion plc plunged in a steady, spiralling slope, broken by two catastrophic dips. In New Year, this year, it dropped 1.5 billion pounds, a debt bomb, massive debt, 1.5 billion pounds. And some financial commentators claim that the firm had simply overstretched itself, gambling on too many different licenses that turned out not to be profitable. It had also suffered delayed payments from some of the jobs in the Middle East. It had a £600 pension deficit that luckily will not affect me personally, but it will cause problems for many of its 20,000 employees, mostly skilled men in the building trades. And the big fear comes from the fact that Carillion is now so integrated into public services that those very services would be threatened by the company's bankruptcy. And as I said the other day, this is a network. I talked about Branson and what he does, old Richard Branson. This is a network of these various companies. The NHS, prisons, railways, the armed forces, highway maintenance, education, all these could be seriously hampered by the shutting down of Carillion. And it even might delay, this is good news actually, the construction of the high-speed railway HS2. Now, this quandary could be solved by a bailout. Now, Sir Vince Cable, Liberal Democrat leader, urged the government not to bail out Carillion. What he says is the perfect illustration of the stupidity of PFI. It's essentially the privatisation of profits and the nationalisation of losses. Those were his words, and he's absolutely right. I say, let the bloody company tank, and then the government can repossess its assets as collateral, and that would include everything it's built at the John Radcliffe, all £800 million worth of the neurological centre, the new eye hospital, the children's hospital, everything, the whole shebang. Just let them take it back, like I would if I had a house with a mortgage and didn't pay it. It's the perfect opportunity to relieve itself of that ridiculous loan system by which Carillion built the place to begin with, and the government bought back at 33% APR, a rate of interest. This rate of interest that would be somewhat uncompetitive if it were offered by any high street financial institution. The government could easily provide its own management, and there is a massive untapped source of skill and experience within the portering community itself. Some of the senior porters could act up for a while until the situation settles down and permanent posts can be filled. Or maybe this will make the government think again about the supposed wisdom of the PFI system. And if they absolutely insist on privatisation as a deep-seated cultural and emotional principle, privatisation for privatisation's sake alone, then why not let the services set up their own small outfits and bid for the contract themselves? And I explored that idea actually a few years ago when I was a porter. Yeah. Now, Carillion, incidentally, has been described as one of the biggest companies in the world that you've never heard of. People said about Serco, etc., etc. And everybody knows its name now, and the negotiations of the last few weeks after that failed to come up with a rescue package. So Carillion went into liquidation. On the morning of January the 15th, it issued an administration notice to the London Stock Exchange, and all its asset holders have been notified. And two other companies in the construction sector, Balfour Beatty and Galliford Try, have been given a bit of extra cash contributions to complete the highway projects that Carillion were carrying out. The costs so far are about £35 million, and I imagine the same deal will be organised for the support services it's involved in, like the facilities management at the NHS. Now, Carillion employees are still being paid, and I saw a Carillion van parked outside a student accommodation block under construction in Oxford. I have heard from my little informant inside the JR Portering that their management are still on site until at least that were on site until the 16th of February. And what happened after that? Well, they've got another company now. I can't say too much about that right now because it's still a bit of a feeding frenzy, but it's still going on. I mean, the other contractors just swooping down like vultures to feed off the Carillion carcass. And as I said, it would be better. Why don't the government give smaller businesses a chance? Give the services a chance to set up their own companies. That's way better than a bailout. Hopefully this will throw the entire ethos of PFI into question. Jeremy Corbyn asked Theresa May some serious questions in the Prime Minister's question time. But he did not mention the fact that PFI is the brainchild of a Labour government, not the Tories. You can't blame Thatcher for this. But the government established a Carillion task force. It includes representatives of businesses, construction, experts, trade unions, financial services, the state, and we'll have to wait until they've finished umming and ahhing. It's going to be a very tedious and lengthy process, and then they'll publish a coherent report. The good thing is, Ian R. Crane has done a brilliant analysis of Carillion, the collapse. And he said that people were lured into buying Carillion stock options that were not as lucrative as they pretended. It's like the fracking. The entire operation is a bubble, and now it's burst. Many people who trusted their advisors with their investment are now penniless. It's really, really sad. I feel sorry for them. And as I say, yes, it is the 70th anniversary of the NHS. It's the 5th of July, and I've got to be on my guard against letting my heart overwhelm my head, this bad habit I have. But I remember the 60th, 10 years ago, and I attended a special event at Oxford Town Hall. I received a medal from the Lord Mayor, someone called Susanna Pressel. Now, she was actually my teacher at school, but she totally failed to recognise me, and I didn't feel inclined to remind her. The 70th anniversary of the NHS is going to be far more glitzy, a real showbiz event, much more so than the 60-year mark, and I don't know whether to feel relieved or disappointed that I will not be taking part in it. Now, good old Prince William himself gave a very passionate speech about the NHS and its servicemen, and a number of servicemen will be singled out for special recognition, but the Prince made sure to point out that the inspirational skill and care and dedication of everybody in the NHS, he could have said bravery but didn't. He did point that out though. But the Tinseltown nature of the upcoming gala is going to need a separate review, but I know that ITV and the Daily Mirror are hosting celebrations, and I must not allow myself to be starstruck into irrationality, as probably the pageant will be intended to have that very effect on the viewer. Will we be given even a hint of the truth, because this 70th birthday of the NHS is actually a deathbed gathering, or maybe even a wake. Sorry to be so black-pilled about it, but it's true. Now, let me end on a cheerful note. I wrote an article, and I want to talk about it now, which was after I watched a video by Slackset about an argument, his own feelings about conflict with other people, and the introspection he gets to about expressing feelings. And it's really funny because I feel in a similar situation, and I had this strange feeling. This was a while back. This was back in last year, just after the last St Theo's actually. But I got this feeling everyone was attacking me at once. And as the skeptics, I say this to the skeptics, I may be a paranoid conspiracy theorist, but being paranoid doesn't mean everybody is not out to get me. And it was really weird. There was this one incident I won't talk about because it's related to a person's a private thing. But there was at the very same time though, I had a comment from one of my posts on Facebook. Yeah, I got into an argument with someone on Facebook. Can you believe it? And this is from this guy. He's an intermittent person. Or I wouldn't call him a friend, an acquaintance. I haven't seen him since 2011. He was at one of the Exopolitics events. But we come across each other occasionally, like at David Icke Forum meetups. And he's the kind of person who was always very courteous in real life, but online he could behave really badly. And I mean, it's not aggression; it's more passive aggression, as Slackser knows only too well. He left a comment on one of my posts that was sarcastic, very bitchy, and subtly abusive. And he's done this sort of thing before. A few years ago, I was politely debating with someone, and he waded in with his size 12, and he made this really snide comments, clutching at straws, Ben, he said. And because this incident happened within the hour of this other one, I snapped. And it's also connected to the trolls and the Larry Warren business. My tolerance levels were really taking a battering, and my professional decorum did break down. But as I've said before, hospital portering has taught me a hard but very worthwhile lesson on how to disarm these kinds of antagonists, and that is the dignity statement. And I've talked before on here about how to use it, and I've explained how to use it. I've done various videos about this and some articles, and I told you that when it's used correctly, how effective it is against retaliation against enemies in an ethical manner. I absolutely guarantee it'll totally disarm your antagonist. And this is another situation, as with little Miss Stuck-Up Little Bitch Nurse, well, I've used it in my post-portering life. And this was one of those occasions. And so what I did was, with these people, I actually sent them, you might think this is a bit childish, and I suppose it might be, but I sent them the lyrics to the same Porter song that I sung to the Stuck-Up Little Bitch Nurse. And then I blocked them. I waited for the little tick to appear saying they'd seen it, and I blocked them before they had a chance to reply. Alright, that's childish, but how mature are we meant to be, and for how long? Who benefits when we turn the other cheek again and again and again against aggressive and exploitative emotional vampires, #pugilists, and who all smiles when you meet them in person, and they snipe and gripe at you from behind their keyboards and monitors. And because we have this professional decorum and this maturity, they just do it even more. So I took some time off from being Mr. Cool, Calm and Collected Exporter, okay? Just very briefly. And I was on a roll. As soon as I'd done this to these two people, I went and did it for two other people. Now, one of these people is someone who unfriended me a couple of months ago, and it still pisses me off, because I just disagreed with him about Dr. Judy Wood. And the other is this co-host of this Skeptic radio show, where he used to present a show with Tristan Swale, and he unfriended me because I wouldn't join the anti-Darren Perks cult. And again, I keep trying to engage people in rational debate. It's not. Yes, I tried this, and he said, "Oh, Ben, stop prevaricating." It's amazing how it's petty, I know, but these things just linger. And Slacks, he talks about a hump of hate, and he's absolutely right. And I think the reason I'm still angry about what happened is after this time has passed is because I didn't react correctly at the time. These feelings don't just go away; they fester. And now I've done this, I'm able to find peace. I mean, I feel uncertain. Some people say it's out of character, maybe. But if my character includes biting my tongue and suffering in silence, then it's a flaw, not a quality. And I've just had enough of it. I've really, really had enough of it. So thank you everyone for sharing this St Theo 2018 experience with me. I hope to see you next week, Tuesday the 26th, at the Britannia, 7 PM. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. At times I despair, and many, many times during my service I despaired, and I sometimes thought it's not worth it. It's just, I'm wasting my time. I'm banging my head against a brick wall. But it was that little voice inside me that just kept saying, keep going, Ken, keep going. Keep plodding on. You're on the right track. And I think it was only towards the end that I realised that this was having an effect. That the celebration of St Theo's Day, the dignity statements, all the other things I've talked about, they were going in there. They were getting in there into the hospital portering culture. They were getting in, even among those who claim not to be affected, even among the most cynical, privately, silently, they would admit to me. They would admit that they were. And that was really, really heartening. Really, really was.